Yeah. 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 Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of Rivercity 93. It is one of your favorite podcasts of all year outside of our final review podcast. It is the mid-season report card podcast where we look at the first half of the season, review everything that has happened up to this point, and kind of do a micro view of what we might want to complain about. But to help me with all of that is first and foremost is my good co-host, Mr. Matt Myers. Matt, how are you? Are you even engaged with this USL Mexico game? Let's start with that.
I mean, I'm literally looking at it as I talk to you right now. So yeah, repping the very fancy, not actually a jersey, just a generic U.S. soccer shirt. I feel like it's always weird, especially the last 8 years with these games. But like as much as you kind of love Mexican people, love their culture, love their food, there's something about this game that kind of brings it out of you.
Yeah, it's a good rivalry. It's a good hatred. Hopefully, it stays good. Another question I want to ask you that I think you will probably chuckle at: which fan base finds more to crap on a player? USMNT fans with Patrick Agyemang or Richmond Kicker fans with Neil Soyford?
I didn't know our fans didn't like Niels at this point, so I'll go with the other guy from your other favorite team.
Okay.
Or I guess he's not anymore. He's leaving.
Hey,
leaving you
that's fine with me. More money.
Big pile of money. Which wouldn't that be nice if a big pile of money fell into the good old 804 area code?
I mean, we could always go back to the 80s and make a white substance that you sell to people. But hey, that's beyond my complexity. Also joining the show, you might have heard him chuckle here. If you haven't already, I'm gonna give him the sole accolades. He writes for Backhill. He's probably been on CBS Golazo. He's been mentioned in all the realms of U.S. soccer lore. He is the tactical genius that could probably break down a team better than anyone else in U.S. soccer. Is there anything else I'm forgetting, Mr. John Morrissey?
Co-host of the USL show? Did we?
Forgot that show. That's a big show. What's going on, man? Welcome. I know it's your first ever time on Rivercity 93. It is a pleasure to have you on.
No, man, I love the work you guys have been doing. I think this Kickers team is kind of maybe the most fascinating in League One, so I'm happy to be here.
That's good to hear. And also the Dollar Green.
One way to put it, right?
But before that, before we hop into anything, if you haven't already, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and share. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers before the end of the season, so help us with that. Also, if you want to donate to the show and be part of the Discord community, the link is down in the description down below. But if you want to help donate, you can do so at ko-fi.com/Rivercity93 or Rivercity93/donate. So, guys, the Kickers right now, they are probably that meme of Thanos balancing the thing on his finger of perfectly balanced. They're not too bad, but they're not too good. They sit 8th in USL League One. They're already eliminated from the Jägermeister Cup. They got knocked out in the first round of the U.S. Open Cup. And their record right now sits at 4 wins, 4 draws, 6 losses, 24 goals scored, 24 goals against, and 60 points in USL League One. So, John, let me ask you this. And the big reason why we wanted to show, because we wanted to have someone who has no emotional bearing to this team. How did you rate the Kickers before the season started, and how do you look at this team as a whole right now?
Yeah, so I had to go back and look at my season preview to see where did I have this team, and I surprised myself because I said Richmond was going to finish 12th, which feels dumb in hindsight. Because as soon as I watched them, that very first game where they come out and really blitz Tormenta, I'm immediately wowed by the offense and I see the vision. And that hasn't carried on. throughout the season. Like there have been ups and downs. There's been that dry spell since the beginning of May, give or take. But I think where they sit right now, dead even goal difference, in a playoff position in the table, I'm feeling decent about the prospects for this team, and they're certainly exceeding what were apparently pretty low expectations from my end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you, sir?
Well, I want to follow John on that a little bit. So, yeah, for this season, maybe you had a 12th preseason, which I think we all know with USL and players coming in from all over the place. A lot of times it's educated guesses at best because we don't really know who a lot of these guys are, especially at the League One level. But bigger picture, like when you kind of think of the Richmond Kickers as an organization, like what do you kind of think that a random unnamed season for them, quote unquote, should look like?
Mm-hmm.
I think this team comes with a pedigree, especially compared to a lot of the rest of League One. And specifically in these past couple of years under Darren Sawatsky, you expect the Kickers to be competitive and you expect them to be pretty classy with the ball, higher possession, some of the shorter passing as compared to their peers in League One. In that sense, I think some of the ups and downs, some of the stylistic changes we've seen really kind of belie that image of the Kickers that I at least bring to the table as somebody like with that outside perspective. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. And I'm sure we'll dig into some of the shifts we've seen in 2025. But this team looks a little bit different than you might expect traditionally. And I think that's been the most fascinating storyline from afar.
Yeah, this season has been a unique season in terms of how they've gone about, I'm going to say tinkering, but changing things up, changing how, one, the Kickers were perceived to play the last 2 years to now. And kind of also the big thing that Kickers will always bring up is the youth movement, something they hang their hat on with the multiple homegrown players on there. Matt, I'm going to start off with you because I'm asking this question. For you, what's been the most encouraging thing of this season so far? Like, where you looked at this team the start of the year till now, what's been the thing that you've been like, all right, I can still hang my hat on this team and rely on?
Yeah, I think the big positive is that this team has been able to find goals from different sources. Because even the past few years, when been able, God damn it, I got distracted. Oh, it's offside. I'm not sad anymore. But goals, like in the past, it used to be Emmys would score 15, 17, 18 goals a year, and then somebody else had like 3, right? And there'd be a lot of guys with 2 or 3 goals. Already this year, you got Kirkland with 7. Darwin's got 6. Chandler's got at least a few along the way. So we're getting to the point where we're having multiple guys who can reliably score. Now we'll talk about kind of the roller coaster of all of that later on, but not just being all or nothing with a single guy. Being able to say, all right, Darwin's not your day, or if you're out injured, it's not, we're not crippled. Kirkland can be able to pick up a little bit more. Chandler always going to be an absolute threat on set pieces, and now adding a little bit more to his game. So I think that's the most encouraging piece of this year.
Yeah, John, for you, same thing. Like, being the outside perspective, what's been the most encouraging thing you've seen about this Kickers that let you know, like, hey, they might be able to push on and do something in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a twist on the same answer, because it's not only the number of guys who are providing goals, but it's the way that the goals are coming. Like, this team has been good about creating transition opportunities in the press. We've seen them be a little bit more possessive and more controlling in the way they attack at times, and that's produced goals. More recently, there's been a preference for the long ball. That's also producing goals. The fact that the Kickers just have these players who can come and show up and bring that level of performance, no matter what they're trying to do stylistically, it's useful just in terms of you are putting points on the board, but it's also meaningful in that it lets this team be a little bit more experimental in what they're trying to do with the system and the tactics.
Yeah. I think that's been probably like Matt, to your point, like the goals haven't been just one person like we've seen in years past with his teams. Where if it's Emmy, if it's a Bolaños, if it's a God,
That's about it.
I was about to, but just like if you take that person out of the team couldn't finish anything. And now you see that you have a Kirkland, a Darwin, even though it's her, a Bill Hart, other people that are now stepping up to play scoring. That's great. And I think the other thing too, I know there's been some nitpicking about it right now just because performances hasn't been there. But the fact that the Kickers are building depth via the youth, which is saving them money, but it's also probably the proper way you want to build a team out, and especially in those lower rotational spots, I think is a positive there as well. On the flip side of that, I think the most frustrating thing has been the revolving door at center back. And as much as I love that, the more I look at this team, I think this team really is missing a defensive midfielder, like a true, proper defensive midfielder. But I would love to hear from y'all. Like, what's been the most frustrating or disappointing trend thus far for y'all this season, looking at this team?
I mean, for me, we've talked about it a million times. It's not just that the defense leaks goals. Sometimes they'll have not to this extent, but it's been the absolute idiotic way that some of these goals, get given up, right? Whether you go all the way back to the first game in Cello's, just bizarre, tackle in the box to give away a penalty, to some of the other, Snedden's had a couple of mystery passes that have led directly to goals. I feel like each of the other center backs have had moments where it's just like, dude, come on, man, what are you doing here? And if you cut, well, I wouldn't say cut all of them out because that's never going to be realistic. But if you cut even half of those out, it probably feels a lot different right now. Not just because there's probably a couple of results that change, but just a better overall feel of, okay, it's not the team playing against the other team and against themselves, for most games.
Yeah, you don't have as many shooting yourself in the foot moments as we've seen.
Right. If we're going to get beat, let's get beat. Like, we saw it happen, Lexington. We saw it happen in Louisville against, championship opposition. So be it. If that happens, I can live with that. It's when, there's games where you're not convinced that the other team's actually better than you, and then you kind of hand it to them on a silver platter.
Texoma. That's the game. That game still pisses me off.
I mean, among others.
Yeah, that's what Texoma does to everybody, so you can't take that to heart.
Yeah. John, what about, if you have anything you want to add to it before we move on?
Yeah, you mentioned Snedden a little bit. For me, from how good he was at the end of 2024 to the kind of grab bag you've got this season, that feels like a factor that's really put a lid on how good Richmond can be at times. Because I think the defense has been mistake prone. You see those errors that are so debilitating. But if you're getting that like plus level goalkeeping, it can patch over a lot of the problems. And I know Snedden he's young, he's improving, but we haven't seen that difference making in a way this season. And that has just kind of compiled to make some of the other issues feel that much worse.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We already touched on it a little bit more, but we'll go ahead and talk about the taxes of the Kickers. So this Kickers team has set up vastly different than maybe 12 months ago this time last year, where this team was very possession heavy, wanted to control the ball, very slow pace, where now this team is, Matt, as you best say it, all offense, no breaks. Like, that's how pretty much I best describe this team.
Well, some games.
Some games. So John, this is the big money reason you're on the show. Like, how would you describe this team identity right now, and what tactical approaches has Darren made that really more or less made an identity for this team?
Yeah, if I wanted to describe this Kickers team in a word, it would be verticality. Like, they are trying to move forward as quickly as possible, as much as possible, to the utmost degree. And that wasn't necessarily something we saw in seasons past, right? Like, Richmond was a little bit more willing to pass it around the back, be patient, trying to goad the defense out. And over the course of 2025, we've seen different forms of what that verticality can mean, but that's been the underlying component that kind of defines this team. So in those early matches, it was the 4-1, 4-1-ish shape, give or take, depending on the alignment of the midfield. But you're trying to find players at their feet between the lines. You're really stretching the defense with what you're getting with Espinal or Hayden Anderson, those sorts of players with some flair on the wing that defenses have to respect. Once the injuries came and some of that dried up, it became, not to say like they're just lumping it route one, but you're seeing a little bit more of that. And hey, I mean, it worked against Union Omaha. We know that there is a blueprint where that can be this team's identity. But overall, like the goal is move the ball from defense to offense as quickly as you can, no matter how you're doing it.
With that technical identity, it's something I've noticed this year is that the midfield, they're more or less bypassing the midfield. They're not using the midfield as much in build up as we've seen in years past, where it really was Neil Vigneault's getting on the ball and then him dictating play. This year, it seems like the midfield is a part of the team, but they're not the sole reason of the team. And we've seen turnovers in the midfield. Is those midfield turnovers due to how Darren is 17, like you just said, like get the ball as quickly as you can to their goal, and if a turnover happens, it happens. Right?
100%, because like the speed of the decision making has to be that much faster, which for players at the League One level, like it or not, it can be a challenge. You think about the situations when the ball does land at somebody's feet, you're likelier to be facing pressure. It's a little bit harder to just have that space and time given the state of the game that Richmond is trying to create. And obviously that leads to problems after you turn the ball over. I mean, I think about that Texoma game where the first concession, like there's a turnover in the midfield, Texoma breaks, everybody's recovering to one spot, like just looking at the ball, not realizing there are runners everywhere else on the pitch. So when you lose the ball in the midfield, you don't have that sense of control. You're not setting the tempo. There's almost a domino effect that I think Richmond has set off a couple times too many this season.
Sounds fair enough. Matt, like if we look at the second half of the season, moving forward, I know we're going to move a little bit ahead, but just tactically, what adjustments does Darren make on the field to try to eliminate those midfield turnovers that seems to be this team's kryptonite?
I mean, I think short of finding new midfielders, those guys are who they are, right? And you just kind of have, play to their strengths a little bit more because look, there's not a real creative midfielder in the bunch. You got Dak, you got Niels, who's much more a shuttler than anything else. You've got Chandler, who's doing as good a job as I think he can at that spot, and he's good at crashing into the box, but he's not necessarily a creator in and of himself per se. Vaughn is a top sub. I'd say Andrew Richmond's probably the most likely one to actually be able to create something, and he's just finishing his junior year of high school right now.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
So like showing a little bit of promise in the short cameos he's got so far, but I don't think that's a realistic thing to put on him to be the person who's really going to be able to change that. And I think we even saw in that Lexington game something that John was alluding to, this speed of thought, not just even the speed of play. That's going to take time for him to be able to adjust up. He's even referred to that in one of your interviews with him post game, right? So understanding that, I think you got to figure out, okay, how do we work around this? How do we minimize this? But I think more than anything else, they need to figure out how to avoid kind of just the all-in moment, because this team is pretty much consistently all-in shootouts or pounding 1-0 games, usually not in our favor, into boredom, right? And almost nothing in between. So it's how do you be able to get a little bit of offensive output and then be able to lock it down, or be able to, okay, we conceded. How do you keep that at bay while still getting going? We thought we might have saw that in Omaha, get it 4-1. Now it still ends at 4-3. So just being able to not just have the light switches say both on or both off. It can be all right. We can have the offense and we can have the defense on the same day. Wouldn't that be a novel concept at least once?
Yeah, John, I'm gonna make you a fantasy manager right now. So I'm gonna ask you a question. If you were managing this Richmond Kickers team, how would you fix this defense without adding in new players or whatever? How would you go about fixing this defense and midfield to eliminate those all-in moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hinted at something early on, which is just pick two center backs and run with it. Like, there's not a spot on the field that is more reliant on chemistry and relationships. And I know some of that has been health, but like, if you can get two guys, sort out the back line, and just trust that as your core, that matters. Something we saw in the Omaha game, which I think, frankly, like Darren's ahead of me on this one in terms of a change, is using more of a double pivot, like two defensive midfielders in the mix, even if they're not pure defensive midfielders in terms of the skill set they bring to the table. Just having two warm bodies occupying that space, being there to stop opposing counterattacks and provide stability can be huge. I love what we've seen from Dakota this season at that spot, but I think there are times where, just given the intensity of the press, given the situations he's put in, it can be a little bit overwhelming with just having the single player. So if you can sort out those spots, you solidify the core, everything starts to make a little bit more sense, and it solves a lot of the problems we've been discussing.
Okay. So find an extra body just to throw in the defensive midfielder.
Yeah, just drop somebody who's playing a little bit further forward, a little bit deeper, and see what you get in terms of the solidity.
Play with 12. That would help.
Yeah, that too.
That'll do it. Of course, Matt. I feel like we always get in a chat about like tactics and identity and whatnot. Is Darren going to stick with this throughout the whole year, or will we see it change like how we did last year?
In terms of shape, I think it'll stay the same because it pretty much always has since you got here. Like whether you call it a 4-3-3, 4-1, 4-1, this really depends on how you look at it. But the core of how the team lines up is rarely, if ever, changed. It's what they do with the ball that's a little bit more different. I think they like the idea of what they're doing right now, so I don't think there's a major impetus to change. Now, if that Omaha game hadn't happened, it might be a different story because we'd be looking at a solid 3 months without a win. But I think that you might have stemmed some tides right there. So I think we'll see a little bit more of the same. Hopefully Darwin gets back healthy because we've talked about this kind of an appealing concept to see Darwin and Bill Hart on either side of Kirkland and see what that group you might be able to pull together, or maybe it's put one of the more, for lack of a better way to put it, runner type of wingers on one of the wings and drop one of those guys into the middle in the midfield. See what we saw a little bit of that from time to time with Darwin earlier in the year. I think that's probably going to be the most likely kind of tactical shift that we would see. But yeah, I think Darren and the staff, they are who they are at this point. We're not going to see anything radical. Even last year, it was mostly going from, okay, we're just going to give up on the possession, make these games ugly, and it worked to be able to grind out a few 1-0 wins that were needed to be able to get over the line.
Okay. Yeah, no. And I mean, talking about tactics, I think one of the players that's really stood out to me this year that probably benefited the most of the system is Josh Kirkland. I mean, a guy who last year was a more or less backup. Like, I still joke and laugh that his name on Twitter was Rue Childs 45. But yeah, he's been one of the standout players. John, for you, when looking at this Kickers roster, has there been any other players that stand out to you or that have really been the MVP so far this year for the Kickers?
I get the sense I might be higher on Seufert than the average Kickers fan, because every time I watch this team play, I just come away impressed with what he's doing in a midfield where like there are problems in a defensive sense. I think he is so talented whenever he's got the ball at his feet. He's top 10 in the league, I want to say, and passes into the box and chances created, like a really progressive option. And somebody who, when you've got players like Espinal and Kirkland and Billhart making those runs, being dangerous, Seufert has the ability to hit them in the way that few other players do. Like he's fundamentally different than someone like a Vignoles who can set the tempo but also has that upside. But I think he's been so impressive and so important to this club's best moments this year. So yeah, Seufert would be, if not the MVP of the team, at least the player that I've enjoyed watching the most.
Yeah, no, like I'm not a Nils hater at all. I've enjoyed watching him this year. I think my only knock on him is that he looks a little slow sometimes in the press. Like he looks like flat-footed. Like he's not a very mobile player, but once you get him going, it's very hard to either A, get the ball off for him, or B, like if he knows he can make a pass, like he's I would say a risky passer. And that's something I don't mind at all. Matt, what about you? Who's been your MVP or standout player thus far?
I think it's got to be Darwin, right?
Yeah,
because he carried the offense early on. He gets hurt. It's not a perfect, 1-to-1 with when the downturn happened, but it's overlapped a bit, and because he's dynamic. He's one of the few guys on the team can actually create his own shot out there. And we saw, I mean, how many times did we see that? I feel like we saw almost 3 or 4 consecutive games where he was able to get on the ball and create something from nothing, and then just blister one into the side netting from 18 to 25 yards out. Bill Hart, I think, has the potential to be a guy like that, too, and hopefully we're seeing him get back to full max shape. But I mean, it's different without Darwin out there, because I mean, how many times in the last month have we talked about, all right, well, who are we going to try on the left now? Who are we going to try on the left now? Thought about this idea yet? And it's the same conversation we've had for the last couple of years of anyone there. So being able to have somebody who could be reliable there and be able to create something out of nothing and just be able to create in general. I think there's you can't say enough about something like that. And I think it's a pretty easy choice for me that he's been the MVP so far.
Yeah, it's funny how we went from the right wing a couple of years ago, like, yo, we need to stop having a revolving door, to now the left side with Darwin out. But it's also not funny, but interesting that each of us have a different attacking player to be the MVP, who's all been a key piece of this team, but nobody has said a defensive player at all.
I mean, how could you?
I know.
Well, not to be mean, but like who would it even be? Like Simon, I guess.
Yeah, that would be my guy.
Yeah, that would be the only one I would like. If we're doing a top 5 most important players of the team thus far, it'd probably be Simon at 5. And even then, I'm still like,
yeah, default almost.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean that is interesting given what we've seen out there. But on the flips, well, not on the flip side of that, but talk about MVP, most improved overall. To me, I will give it to Kirkland. I will also put Matt Bolduc in there just because of what he's provided. Because it's also funny that like him, Kirkland, and Darwin, when we did the preseason podcast, we all kind of had the same idea of like, all right, let's see what they do this year. It was that kind of that same advocate with all 3 of them, and I feel like Bolduc being in that right wing spot, he knows his role. Yes, there's limitations with him as a player, but for him to be part of that regular season team, leave, go to Flint City, win a title there, miss a year almost, and then come back and start off so strong, I will put him in the most improved. And what he's also mean to like players like Kirkland and a couple of the young players in there as well. So For
Yeah,
y'all.
I know this one maybe isn't internal, but Hayden Anderson year over year from like what he showed in Greenville versus this, like I didn't see this coming from him. And I know it's up and down with so many of these attackers, even they've been really in and out of the team.
Yeah.
But I think Anderson on his day has been so impressive and really has that sharp edge in the final third, whether it's as a dribbler or a passer. Like he forces defenses to respect him, rotate his way, and he has this gravity that just opens up space for his teammates. So Kirkland is the correct answer, frankly, but like Hayden Anderson gets a shout here.
Yeah. Matt, you can probably be a little bit more attached to this, but I feel like, I mean, we were talking about, right? Like Darwin has probably been the most impressive signing this offseason. You know, like, but is there any other player who stands out to you? It's like an offseason signing that, you know, like this team would be fundamentally different if they were not a part of the squad.
I mean, I think the only other real option, here is, Niels, for all the reasons, John mentioned earlier. Like, think back to the last couple years, ever since Ethan Bryant, left, we really didn't have anybody, that can, kind of be that connector between, the defenders and the attack. We had midfielders in there, but they were, Zaka types who were realistically more, destroyers, or they were Vinyals, types who were attacking players masquerading as midfielders.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Didn't really have somebody who could actually be able to collect, reliably advance the ball, and be somebody who in a pinch get the ball to, and they're not going to panic when they get doubled in the midfield. They're going to be able to find that pass and be able to cycle the ball around cleanly. And it's not a glamour spot for almost any team, and I think that's why usually players who are in those kind of positions don't always get the love from fans that maybe they deserve, because it's not a highlight reel position. It's not a traditional stats position, but it's also the reason that coaches all over the world are desperate to find guys who can play in that kind of a position, because they help actually make the team go.
Yeah, yeah. John, anything you want to add to that, or?
No, yeah, just 100% agreed that, I mean, Espinal is the most impactful signing, but obviously I've got my heart for Soyford a little bit here.
It's still funny to me how many people get Niels and Neil confused. Even amongst like Kickers fans. Like,
It's bad, man.
We upgraded. We have one with an S now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, one with an S now. So I'm gonna ask you guys this question. It's kind of like two parts, but who is a player right now in this team that is flying under the radar that we're not talking about, but deserves more love? And then on the flip side of that, who's a player who has underwhelmed this year, but still has the potential to bounce back and have a stronger second part of the season? I see I asked a good question because I made Matt think.
Can I pick the same player for both answers, actually?
Ooh, okay. I'm interested to hear this.
I want to say Emmy.
Oh, okay.
Because he scored 2 goals. They're both in the same game. The rest of the season, hasn't necessarily gotten going on the score sheet. But we didn't see when he plays at center, forward. He's able to hold the ball up, draw those fouls. Really, he almost plays nowadays more as like a false nine, type. Dropping deeper into the midfield, and the offense runs differently when he's in there. But it can still run well because he can pull the defense out and hopefully let one of the wingers run in behind into space when we're playing a little more over the top. He hasn't been on his goal scoring pace that he's been in past years, right? So that's why I think he's maybe not getting the same level of attention or respect, but I also think that he has that ability to be able to really be that impactful player in the second half of the year, because if he can be able to turn on, we actually have 2 players who can play the center forward position and score goals at the same time. You get creative with that. Kirkland could step wide a little bit. You could be able to pull back a classic from like the COVID season, drop Emmy deeper into the attacking midfield, and maybe see what that looks like. through there. So it's a little weird, but I'm going to say I'm for both of those answers, actually.
Okay. John, what about you, sir?
I think Chandler O'Dwyer is a player that can be really useful at times. Obviously, he gets the goals in a way that can patch over some of the other things. But in terms of the role he plays in this team, in that like underneath the striker spot, it's less, I think he's been poor, and more, I want somebody with a little bit of a different profile, maybe. And then again, like nothing against him, because I think he's quality and he shows up when it matters a lot of the time. But like if there was a more creative, incisive passer in that position, or somebody who was maybe a little bit better, I don't know, in the supporting movements behind a Kirkland or an Emmy, that would fit the bill better for me. So that's if I'm picking nits. I think if there's a player who's under the radar that deserves some credit, Guilherme Franca in the back line has been kind of really solid, winning almost 2/3 of his duels, which is by far the most of any Kickers defender this year. Has done well to be progressive as a passer, even if he's not like a Neil Vignoles as a center back kind of quality of player. Third on the team in clearances, like doing the job no matter what he's being asked to do. Maybe not entirely mistake free, but I think amongst the center back group, I've been impressed with his solidity.
So,
I want to hop in here because you brought up Chandler, and he's been topic of conversation for a few years for us now, ever since he really broke into the team in the 2023 season. In your opinion, what is he? Because we've seen him all over the field, and I don't think we have a good idea of maybe where he's best. We have some ideas maybe where we don't want to see him, but not sure we know like where in the idyllic world Chandler would fit onto a field.
I think his best role is kind of this roving player who can be in the final third in support of a primary legit number 9. Like I don't want Chandler O'Dwyer leading my line necessarily, but I don't want him to like be a starting winger who has the responsibility to cover the whole length of the field and contribute like that. I think the position he's playing now, which is a little bit more central, kind of blending number 8 with more of a forward role, isn't bad in theory, but in the context of how this Kickers team wants to play, I don't think it's the mold of player I'm looking for in that spot.
Okay.
I think that's about where we've landed. Like you got to have him on the field, and that seems to be about the best spot. Agree. We are not interested in seeing Chandler a winger, anymore. We've seen that experiment.
That would be nice.
Now Chandler a goalkeeper, you might get me. You might get me there. Another player you brought up that I have, been chopping at a little bit is Guy Franca. And I'm going to tell you what I think about it. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. He is a player that is best at when the ball's on the ground and in front of him. He's a great center back. Like he can get in a physical battle. He can do great in 1v1s. Like he wins duels, things of that nature. When the ball's up in the air or behind him, he seems to struggle with like aerial awareness. Is that about right with him?
I think that's a fair way to describe him. And I think that speaks to the fact that like he's racking up the clearances when he keeps everything in front of him, when he can take on a defender who's dribbling his way. Great, no complaints. That's what you want him to be in. There's something about the crossing situations, the recoveries, where he needs to be a little bit more mobile on his feet and have those eyes in the back of his head. You can miss some aspects there that can be troublesome for the balance of this team.
Yeah. Okay. I think for me, I think the player that's flying under the radar. I know people love Maxi. I love Maxi as well, but Hayden Anderson is, so far to me, like he's done a really outstanding job at that left back spot. He's Simon Fitch, but on the left side. Like he's really solid. I mean Beckett. Darn it. I said Simon. Beckett Howe. My fault. I should know that. On the left hand side at left back, he's been solid. Like he's been defensively solid. Granted, he does need to work on the offensive side of this game, but I think that will come with time. If Darren can't find a CDM, right, I think what he might have to do, which something I've been interested in seeing is leaving one of those fullbacks in is like as an auxiliary center back or CDM. And Beckett might be able to do that job if he's not contributing offensively. I'm pretty sure he has the frame to more or less be an auxiliary CDM, be able to help Dak, be able to clean up if the Kickers want to hold position higher up the field. To me, I think a player that has been underwhelming that I'll go with the other center back is Clavicella. Like I really thought he was going to really show improvements going on to the second year. Well, really, this is his first full year here with the Kickers. But I really thought that he was going to, be the starting catalyst with the center back, almost what we have with a Jalen Chrysler or a Kyle Fittner, kind of that rock center back that Darren's more or less when he's had his best defensive teams have, and I haven't seen that from him. So yeah, I'm kind of disappointed in him.
So one thing I want to, John, get your opinion on. Yeah. We've rattled off a ton of names so far in this podcast. There's one that hasn't come up, and he's kind of been the centerpiece of the Kickers' whole ethos. Griffin Garnett. As an outsider, when you see Griffin out there, what are you seeing? Where do you see his like potential level going?
I mean, I wrote pretty glowingly about him last year with the premise of if he stays on this arc, he could legit be like an MLS ceiling player. I don't know if I'm cooling off of that take entirely, but I think this season, because of the way the team has evolved and the situations he's been put in, has been a little bit more challenging. He's felt less assured. I think the passing and the onus that's been put on him in that regard has felt like a trial by fire in some ways. Obviously, I still believe in the potential. I love the overall ethos of this team, what they do with youth. And I think Garnett is really at the vanguard of that. Like he's, for me, the best prospect that this team is playing right now. But yeah, there have been moments, much as everybody else in this back line, where you can just feel the struggle. You can feel that he doesn't have the relationship he wants. He doesn't quite know where he needs to be at a given time, which is natural for a young player and doesn't take away from the vast potential he's got. But yeah, kind of up and down.
Okay. And I guess a follow-up, because obviously, the goal is to be able to move him along at some point. And I think all things being equal, they have visions of getting him to Europe. But if it was the championship, which I think is your bread and butter, are there any situations in that league that you think would be a really good fit for somebody like Griffin?
Oh, that's a great question. Just trying to run through the mental, like who needs a center back right now. I mean, I even think about, and granted, I wouldn't wish.
Even if it's not starting, even if it's like a third center back, a good place for him to be able to continue to grow and maybe reach those MLS levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think about a place like Loudoun United where they're somewhat thin at that position, but with a coach like Ryan Martin who is able to take a center back and really teach them possession principles, figure out how they can best support a very possessive attack. And when you're a defender with the natural skill set that Garnett has as a defender, if you can get the mental game up there, if you can get him as a passer who can really break lines and do that effectively, which I think is there for him. Like there is a world where that is part of the arsenal he brings to the table. That would be an awesome situation. In terms of just like sheer playing time, let's get this guy onto the pitch. I would love to see him someplace like Orange County. Like they are willing to play youth. They're great at moving players on. I think the way that they play is somewhat similar to the Kickers, frankly. They haven't had the most stability at the back of this season or really over the past couple of years. So I think those would be the two that I'm most interested in.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna move on from that. Even though that's a great conversation, we can make a whole podcast about where the youth and where we can see them at. Maybe for an off-season show. Who knows? But for the Kickers so far this year, what's been the bigger hindrance? And both of y'all can answer this or one. Has it mostly been injuries or depth? that have led the Kickers to being where they are right now in the standings.
I feel like they go a little bit hand in hand, right? But I mean, I remember saying on the season preview, like, this team's going to be in trouble if they get hurt at all, because the first 11, 12, 13 guys, good to go. After that, it gets really iffy really fast. And I think there's been some guys who have stepped up better than I would have expected. Like, if you had told me preseason that Bolduc was going to give us anything, I don't know if I would have believed you. Told me that Beckett was going to give us consistent, decent to quality minutes at left back. I wonder a little bit what happened to Maxi, but yeah, I'd be pleased that Beckett was able to step in there. No, we talked about Kirkland. Nobody saw this level coming. So there's been some guys who have kind of stepped up and really helped to flesh out the rotation a little bit. But even now, like last few games, there's been a couple of injuries, but love the concept of getting young academy guys minutes. Love even more having high quality depth to come off the bench and you'd be able to finish a game off.
Yeah.
So,
but that would definitely help as well. So, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to best phrase this question. There's not necessarily a game I will call the turning point of the season so far. I mean, if you want to say it might be the Union Omaha game, but that's literally the last win. So I'm going to ask you guys to kind of look ahead into the future of what game within the next month or two is going to be most pivotal to the Kickers to make sure they stay on the trajectory of which they want to go, which is having a playoff game. To me, it feels like it's the Chattanooga home game. I feel like that's really like the tipping point, because I feel like if you lose that game, not only one, you get knocked out of the playoffs, but then also two, it's Chattanooga. Like, that team's been the Achilles heel of this team for so long.
But this time, it's not. At least it's not at Chattanooga. We already did that swamp game.
I know.
Game is a loose term.
Best thing in the world, man. Game of the year.
No, I mean, Chattanooga just had some weird games this year. Also, like a 12 o'clock noon game.
Yeah.
That was also weird.
Well, that was like 2 days later, and the field was possibly even worse at that point.
Yeah, for real. But going to y'all, what do y'all feel like might be the turning point game for this team?
I don't know if I call it turning point, because I think it's hard to say in advance. But I think looking through the rest of the traditional summer, so everything before Labor Day, we've got, I think, if I'm counting right, 7 games, and one of them's a Jaeger game, so it's obviously not that one. So 6 options. I would pick 2 out that I think are probably going to be really as close to must wins, or at very least must not lose. I've got Greenville coming up on the 20th. They're in the muck right there with us. Right now, already drove them 3-3. Probably should have won that game for being realistic. Had a lot of success down at Greenville, oddly enough, in the past. And this isn't a vintage Greenville team. This team, borderline kind of sucks right now. So you absolutely cannot lose that one. The draw is not ideal, but it's probably passable. The other one I have my eyes set on is actually the other league away game during this stretch at Portland. I think that's going to be one where they have the draw disease. They just drew again today, but all those draws are getting inching them right up there, and I think they're probably likely to be right around that competition for the 7-8 spot as well. So if you can go in there and be able to kind of drop a hammer and get a win at that point, that might be something that can help push the team over the line at the end of the season.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to shout out that Greenville game, because that was absolutely going to be my answer. Like, Chattanooga is Chattanooga. They're so weird. They're so direct. Like, you can't really account for anything against the Red Wolves. But Greenville has kind of taken Richmond's lunch money in the past month or so. Like, in terms of the way they're playing, it is 4-1-4-1. It's a lot of verticality. The wingers have felt involved. It's really the template that the Kickers tried to set in the opening months of the season. So going into that match, if you're Richmond, are you fighting fire with fire? Like, is that going to be the goal? Or are you trying to do what you did against Omaha, which is play a lot more direct, get the balls over the top, see if you can test the back line? I think the way that Richmond approaches that game against Greenville is important. And obviously the result therein is going to be equally vital.
Yeah. So the month of July really as a whole is really like the antithesis. Like if it goes great, we can not say you might have a half a foot in the playoffs, but if it goes bad, it might be rough to have a good playoff run. I mean, this kind of leads into my next question, man. But like, obviously the Kickers sit 8th right now in the playoffs, but is that 8th spot? Is it fool's gold, or are the Kickers really the 8th best teams? And what I'm trying to say is, the Kickers really the 8th best team in USL League One, or is it fool's gold where we've played the most amount of games, so we've accumulated enough points just to be in that spot? Which one do you feel like is more of right now, John?
So my playoff odds machine, because I'm doing the nerdy math stuff again this year, has Richmond projected 9th right now with a 39% chance of getting in.
Okay.
So they're roughly at the level you would expect. So do what you will with the numbers. Eye test wise, I think this can be a playoff team. The best moments we've seen from Richmond are better than the best moments we've seen from at least 6 other clubs right now. And are you really going to trust like Texoma to keep up the wins? I don't know, man. I don't think so. Like, I think there's enough wiggle room that Richmond can do the job.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like the key word John said is can.
Yeah.
Right. And we've seen
There's always a
on
chance.
the day we've seen them, run neck and neck with some of the good good teams. I think Spokane is outclassed us pretty clearly both times. But beyond that, like Alta beat them. Granted, that was early season Alta. They've picked it up since then, but results are still results. Charlotte, lost that game, but that was early on. Played them right to the death at their place. Chattanooga's the weird thing. Naples, they've come back to earth a little bit. Texoma, they're a little weird. So a lot of teams have caught up in games played. I think Knoxville is really the only major outlier at this point in terms of games played. So we're not the weirdos anymore on the table in that regard. So I don't think it's a function of that anymore. That's started to normalize. I'd say we're probably right about where we should be, all in all, because for as much as you might think the Chattanooga's, Texomas might drop off, it's hard for me to think that Omaha's not going to maybe figure something out along the way, and that might just be a lot of confirmation bias from the last few years of, well, they always figure it out eventually. We've all seen enough sports where there's always one of those teams every year where they'll figure it out. They don't figure it out. But you got to think somebody from that bottom group might actually put 2 and 2 together at some point. Maybe Westchester will figure out how to play a little bit of defense along the way. I don't know, but I mean, I hope not. Because it's funny. They can pick up the Lexington's crown and be able to wear that proudly this year. So I think it's going to come down to the bitter end. It wouldn't surprise me last day of the year hosting Madison that it's get a win, get a draw, and get in. Don't go home.
Matt, I don't need that day in my life. I don't need that day. I don't need that day. So yeah, I mean, now Matt, now you got me stressing. I don't need that day in my life. I don't need that kind of chaos.
That's evil on the part of the schedule makers right there.
Yeah, I don't know who looked at that and was like, you know what, let's do this. And the fact this happened on TV, like, it would be fun though to hand Madison a golden toilet seat on that final day, or maybe they would have clinched it by then. The way how things been going for them there. So realistically, and we talked about already about like the pivotal point of the season, but what needs to happen realistically for this team to make a run? I feel like that's been the hardest thing too, for this team to get back-to-back wins. Is always win, loss, draw, loss, win. It's never like they can get a win and then they can get another win and they can kind of build on it. We've seen teams in this league so far, like AV Alta, Spokane, like teams go Texoma right now, even go on these runs. What would need to happen for the Kickers to have that kind of run? Looking in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's consistent defensive effort from the midfield. If you can win the second balls, make sure you're controlling play, and just clean it up a little bit in transition so you feel like you're shielding the defense a little bit more, that's going to go a long way. Like, I trust that this Richmond team can score goals and do it in a lot of ways. But if you back that up and add a little something in that second phase in the central areas, that'll be paramount to adding that consistency.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll build on that a little bit, more. Being able to effectively kill games off. I think I just went through, kind of about 5 games, where had the lead and just couldn't shut it down and see it out. Granted, some of them are a little more extreme than others. Like, okay, go up, one in the what was it, like the 9th minute against Texoma. Big difference between seeing out 81 minutes worth of lead versus like the Westchester game or the Greenville game where, all right, only had to get over the line for a little bit longer and still tripped over our own feet with that. This team can be able to get a lead and just secure the hatches. That might be the difference maker.
Yeah. John, I'm gonna ask you this question because you watch USL more on a bigger level than what we do. But is there any player from the USL Championship? And we've seen teams so far in USL big moves to loan players in or bring players in. Is there any player in the championship that would be a big boost to the Kickers midfield? And when I'm asking this, I'm not talking about obviously, you want to add like a star 11 player, but that's realistic. So is there any player like on the bench or on the loan list that might be able to help the Kickers in the championship?
No, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, like in terms of the profile, I'm looking for somebody that's somewhere between like a number 6 and a number 8 who can do a little bit of both things and just add that sense of stability to what you're doing in the midfield. And frankly, that's a position that's kind of in demand all across the board. So there's not going to be like an obvious player who is going to be immediately available. I think somebody like a Bradley Sample from Pittsburgh could be interesting. They've got a ton of center mids that don't really have the minutes to do it. Sample somebody who is a college standout, I believe, with Denver. He's done the job defensively. And if you're coming from Pittsburgh, like you are taught defensive discipline, you are not going to be making mistakes or you're just never going to play again. He's kind of lost out because that team can't score and is just throwing forwards onto the pitch right now. But he's somebody that to get him minutes in League One, what I think would be awesome to see. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else in that mold. Before he ended up with New York Red Bulls too, getting Nate Worth from Tampa Bay would have made a lot of sense. He's a player who at one point people thought might move to Europe for 6 figures. Still only 18 years old, I want to say, and just kind of fell out of favor in Tampa Bay. He is a little bit more of a classic number 8 with that creative upside, but he's got a ton of energy, really willing ball winner. That's the kind of model I'd be looking for, like somebody who can put a foot in the tackle, contribute in the press, but also knows how to move the ball forward and be that connective tissue.
Yeah.
I think you just gave John a good article idea for sometime later this year.
Playing matchmaker, yeah.
Hey, I'm always there to help. That's my most important role here in the podcast. So if we're talking about adding a player, and I first want to ask you because to me he's the most unique player because I think he's also most forgotten about. Landon Johnson, the young winger, really was the first signing of this whole youth revolution that the Kickers were doing. But over the last couple of years or so, we haven't really seen a lot. It's been limited minutes. Now, granted, some of that has been injury, but we also seen him healthy and hasn't been part of the 18. How do you I don't want to say fix a player like that, but what can be done to improve a player like that? And is it simply just he just need minutes to more or less make mistakes and just get his feet wet?
Yes, I really do think it is the minutes thing. Like for a player in that position, and with the potential that we've seen from Johnson, like he can be a good dribbler. He's got the speed and physicality. It's a matter of understanding when and how to take risks in the attacking areas and not be wasteful. And there's no way you can do that on the training pitch. Like you got to be facing professional opponents. You need to have that ability to mess up and to learn. And for me, like we've seen the potential, but we've also seen Richmond add 8 or 9 players who can fill the same spots. So it almost seems like maybe minutes for Johnson aren't a priority, which I think is odd at this point in his developmental arc. But yeah, like the guy just needs playing time. And I think that's true of any young player who's coming up writ large in the USL.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure I wasn't crazy thinking about that about Johnson. Like, because really, like the Lexington game, you got what, 45 minutes, Matt?
Yeah.
45, and I think that's probably the most he's gotten. I think
all year. I think.
Yeah, especially all of last year, I think as well. So yeah.
He got a lot of run in 2023. Like he stood out for good reasons. You know, in that Comunicaciones friendly, and that kind of got the hype train going. And part of me wonders now, did that hype train maybe pick up a little bit too much steam too fast right there? That was maybe a little unfair to him at that point. But what happened, and then like you said, there's been some injuries, here and there. So the other side of the argument is that this is a good opportunity for him to learn how to earn minutes through training. I think your mileage might vary on which end of it is it getting real game minutes for is more important being able to actually earn the minutes. More important, probably somewhere in the middle realistically, but such is the life of a professional.
Yeah, for real. Just gotta learn it, man. It comes with maturity. So this next one I'm gonna ask you for both of you is kind of like a 2-part question, but once again, looking ahead, who's the player that most excites you to watch down the stretch? But then also, what is your bold prediction of the Kickers for the rest of the season?
I mean, I've got a combo answer to this. I'm most excited to watch Kirkland and how he keeps growing if he is the number 9 going forward. And my bold prediction is that somebody from the Richmond Kickers, maybe Kirkland, maybe Espinal, maybe someone we don't know yet, somebody from the Kickers is going to win the Golden Boot.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You know what?
So, all right. So you sniped my Darwin prediction there. So let me pivot real fast.
Let's go. Come on.
All right. Here's one that Elliot, you'll especially appreciate.
All right.
Kickers will make the playoffs with Pablo as the starting goalkeeper.
Mm.
You know what? I can really see that happening.
Yeah, but
really see that
I never thought I would say those words.
No, me neither. Now that begs the question: when does Pablo keep his first clean sheet as a kicker?
I'll take the playoff piece. I don't, not as worried about the other piece. It'll
That's
be nice
that's
on the way.
Brutal question, man. Like that is shade.
It's not like it is. It's not intended to be shade. I'm not, but it just blows my mind that Pablo's been here for almost a year and a half now. And he still has not kept the clean sheet, and it's not all his fault. It's not.
Sure.
It's just like you would think, like you would just luck into one, but that also shows the defensive frailties in front of him.
Last year, he was in and out of the team, and none of them were keeping clean sheets at all. Like the first clean sheet, I don't think. I guess the first one was allowed in Open Cup game, and the next one was Snedden's first league game, which wasn't until end of August or early September. So it's not him. And then he's been put in pretty impossible spots so far this year. Just 4 appearances were Louisville, North Carolina, Knoxville, so 3.5 appearances, and then Lexington.
Yeah.
So
it's not been great.
kind of been hung out to dry a few times.
Yeah. For real. So mine, I would say this. I agree with John. I think Kirkland, if he doesn't win the Golden Boot, he will be second. But I think if Kirkland is in the top two of the Golden Boot, I think he gets sold this year. I think the Kickers will try to flip him. Like either, and I'm not talking about to like Europe or to MLS side. I think they will try to flip him to like a championship team. Like think about teams that are struggling near the bottom that really can't score, like a Tampa Bay, right? Like, and also it is funny, man, because I asked you the question earlier about like which fan base, has more disdain for their player, like Patrick Argemon. Like the reason why Patrick is being sold is because what he brings, you can't teach it. And I look at Kirkland that same thing. Like you can't teach physicality. You can't teach someone being 6'2" plus. You can't teach him, how to use his. I mean, you can teach him how to use his body frame, but like you can't teach his stature and what he is. And I think like in a young striker that shows that he can finish goals, like the finesse goals that we saw off the right wing. He's able to win clear headers up in the air. He's able to finish strong with both feet. And clinicalness, I think like a player like that can go for some decent change in the USL ecosystem, especially with like Division One on the rise. Like you can't tell me a player like Kirkland doesn't fit well as a backup option or as a substitute striker, for a USL championship team. And look, maybe we can mess up with Lexington because they're looking to spend money on everyone. But I also think like if the Kickers want to become this option of bringing in young players, like Matt, this is still stuck in my head what you talked about before. Like the Kickers getting back to finding those US U20 players or U18 players that just happen to fall off, and you take a player like Kirkland and then flip him. Who knows? Maybe that does open up another avenue or something. So that's my bold prediction. That get your Kirkland jerseys now because in about 8 months, I got them being sold.
All right. John, so who are the most irresponsible championship teams in terms of spending money that we need to be sending YouTube reels to in this case?
No, it is 100% Lexington. Like if somebody's just gonna like drop more money and sign another player, it absolutely is them. As you were talking about it, I couldn't stop thinking he'd be so good for El Paso, and now I really want it to happen.
You know what? I can see that happening. I can see that happening.
El Paso, like, they don't spend money, but they have money. So, I mean, drop it on Kirkland. Let's go.
Hey, I'm here for it. I'm 100% here for it. So, yeah, man, I think, well, before we wrap up, I would love to get your guys, Matt, you know how we did at the beginning of the year, like our grade on each position. So, do you remember what your grade was, Matt, for each position? Or do you need me to help you kind of run through it?
Not exactly. I mean, I'm almost positive that they're like flipped in order of what they should be now. I think we were pretty universal that we thought this team was going to be a boring, defense first team that struggle for goals, and whoo boy.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. So John, if you want to join this exercise with us, I think it'll be great fun. So we'll start off with goalkeeper. Matt, what will be your grade for the goalkeeper position?
I mean, I think I'll be generous and say C+ right now. Like, it's fine. Like, James had a couple of moments, as I referenced earlier, where it's just like, okay. Like, I feel like if you're any player, you get one of those. You don't get multiple of those before you really start getting dinged, and stuff. So it's fine, but I can't imagine that. You ask around, the league, oh, do you want to, swap your keeper, for Sneddon? That you're going to get a ton of people be like, hell yeah, let's go.
John, I mean, obviously you weren't here. Oh, Matt, back to you. Your grade was a C+ for the goalkeeper position. So about the same. John, for you, my friend, what do you think about our goalkeeper position?
I mean, I hate to be mean, but I'm going to say it's a D. If you look at some of the advanced numbers, Sneddon has allowed, I think, about 4.5 goals more than expected goals he's faced, which means like he's just straight up underperforming. He's the worst goalkeeper in the league this season by that number. Like, I know that can be misleading, but yeah, that's a D for me.
Okay. Kate, she's not here to show. She's recording the podcast right now. She had it at a B, so it'll be interesting to see what she thinks now about it. For me, I had it at a B minus. Yeah, not it. I'm in between y'all. I'll go with a C minus. Like, I think, and this is going to sound really patronizing, but it doesn't mean to be the way. Like, John, like you said, there's no real game changer in the goalkeeper position. And when I think about game changers, I think about like players that have really stood on their head and changed things for teams. Like, you can go back and look at Akira or Nuhu or even this year, like a Matt Levy. Those goalkeepers that can change they can keep a 1-0 or, a 1-1 draw. I've been really disappointed in that, but I can understand why we're playing Sneddon, because if there's no real difference between the vet and the 18-year-old, and there might be a little bit more upside with the 18-year-old in terms of developing him, of course, playing him a little bit more. But really, I need to see more of that game changer or, game saver for the goalkeeper position out of that. I haven't seen it. So I'll go C minus. I'll put it right there. So with that being said, we'll move on to the defenders. Matt, do you want to take a guess at what your grade was?
Probably B. Probably a B.
Sir, you are correct. It was a B. Yeah, that a B.
Yeah, I knew I still wasn't too high on anyone, and I remember y'all giving me a lot of crap about most of my predictions.
So where do you have them at now?
I put him at D plus, mostly because Simon kind of saves him from anything worse.
The good old Richmond boy. I understand that. Kate had it at a B minus. John, what about you, sir?
Yeah, just a flat C on this one. It's been up and down. Like you said, Fitch has been good. I think the center backs, despite it being a revolving door, like we've seen some decent performances. So yeah, just mid for that one.
Okay. Wow. I had this at a B. I'm not gonna lie to you. As a whole, oh man. God. I'm not trying to be too now I'm trying to be objective, but not like hot take either. I put it at a D plus, man. Like, I think it's not more so individual. I think it's the collective group as a whole. Like, I think it's just the errors that we've seen, and then also just the revolving door. Now, granted, some of that's been because of injury, but we also haven't seen a defensive player outside of Simon that has really found their form and been like, no, like I'm going to be the defensive, hound on this team. We haven't seen that. And this team has been lacking that for a while. And I think the thing that really separates us from the top teams in USL League One is that you can look at those top teams and kind of like, okay, that's a defensive leader. That's a defensive leader. With Richmond, I kind of look at the team as like, I don't know who the defensive leader on this team is.
I feel like that's most of not just defense, it's most of the team right now. Like, who's the real alpha dog out there?
Yeah, for real. And that's the part I struggle with, because I don't know who it is. Like, if this team was to get into a fight, who's the person out there that is willing to do the dark arts to get this game won? I don't know.
I mean, Maxi, but he hasn't been playing recently.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe it is so. Midfield. Matt, you want to take a guess at what your grade was again?
I'm pretty sure it progressively got worse the further we went up the field. So if I had defense at a B, I'll say midfield is a C plus.
You are correct again. You're 3 of 3, sir.
Well, 3 of 3. Remember what I thought in March, not necessarily on how they're actually going to be.
All right, yeah. So for this, Matt, where do you have him at now?
I'll probably drop him half letter grade down to a C.
Okay.
At this point, there's some individual good things in there. I don't know if they're really clicking the way that they need to as a group. And then the depth in the midfield is just like almost non-existent. So if a guy gets hurt a little bit, like even when Vaughn was out these last couple of games, like there's no one behind him. To be able to step in, even if somebody gets hurt, because Chandler's been getting hurt, not seriously hurt, but little nagging injuries, and all of a sudden you have two guys who can't go, then crap, who's next?
Yeah, for real, that's true. Before I get mine, John, what do you think about the Kickers midfield? How would you grade them?
Yeah, I'm kind of waffling between grades here. I'm gonna be nice and say it's a B minus.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm staking my claim as the Swiffert guy here. I've been nitpicking Dakota and O'Dwyer a lot in the past hour, but I think both of them, given what they've asked to do in this team, like they've mostly lived up to expectations. And yeah, you can talk about the fact that the depth is poor. Some of the performances haven't been up to snuff. But I think overall, like if we're just looking at how are guys performing in the roles that Darren is saying, go out and do it, they've been B minus, which isn't great. Like I was hoping for better on my report cards, but it's a grade.
Yeah.
Depends what class it was, really.
You know what? You guys are old enough. Remember, you used to get like paper report cards, and you try to get like the same pen that matched it, and we try to change that minus to a plus. Hey,
oh yeah,
you kind of fudge it. So I had the midfield at a B minus. I think overall, yeah, this is the group I was more so down on. I'm really gonna move it up to a B, just because. Now, and granted, this is also with a grain of salt, like because I think Dak is moonlighting as a center defensive man instead of a real center defensive man. I think his true position is center back. But I've liked what I've seen out of Nils. I think Chandler, when he's in form, and hopefully he gets back into form quicker than later, he's been, he's been everything. I don't really know what to describe him as, and that's something hard we had to do. But besides that point, I've liked what I see of him. I like what I've seen out of Andrew Richmond. I think there's some growth there. James Vaughn as well has more or less. You talk about it, Matt, like how Matt Boduk surprised you. James Vaughn has really surprised me because I really thought like he was going to be like almost the bare minimum. Like if he plays, is case of emergency center defensive midfielder. Based on what I saw last year, and he's really stepped up. And when he was out of this team, the whole midfield kind of lost that bite, which I really wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I think my big counterpoint to y'all giving them in the B range would just be we've talked earlier, in this podcast about the whole, offensive, plan right now seems to be to skip the midfield, and if the whole plan is for your unit to not even be involved for half the game, I mean that seems a little tough, but whatever. These are arbitrary grades, so
yeah. Hey, sometimes you got to grade on the curve,
And I think there's levels to it. Like, one, it is like just an arbitrary grade, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a teacher. And then, like even when you're like skipping the midfield, like those guys still have to be involved.
Oh,
and
of
you
course.
look at O'Dwyer and Swiffert and even Vaughn, what they contribute, like as that second level of support. I think it's really crucial to the balance. So I'm weighing that more heavily than some of the problems going the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, but not least, attack. Matt, do you want to see if you could go 4 for 4, sir?
Well, I thought they were going to be bad, so I'll say preseason C.
No, we had
Worse.
a B plus.
I did. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. Thinking that. Oh, guess what?
Hey.
All right. So what you got right now, sir?
I'll go with the B plus.
Right.
Right now, and the main reason it's not an A is because there's still those games every few games where nothing happens. Like literally nothing happens.
Yeah.
And can't have multiple of those and get an A in my book.
Okay.
Otherwise, rewind to the last hour of this podcast when we're talking about all the fun attacking pieces that we have.
Yeah, very true. Very true. John, for you, sir, what do you put this attack as?
Yeah, B+ for all the same reasons. I think the bright moments are really bright. There's a lot of players that can make an impact, but there are just those games where it's flat and you want to see that little extra bit of consistency to really lift it to that A level.
Yeah. I agree with that. I won't really add much to it. I had my grade as an A. I think I was probably the most optimistic out of all three of us on the preseason show. Obviously,
I mean, that's usually how these episodes go.
Yeah,
we have a rolls.
But I'll put it at a B. I agree with everything I was saying. I think this attack has shown that they can score, be able to create in different ways, things like that. What I would like to see is maybe what knocks us down from an A is maybe like a Landon Johnson really step into his role in the second part of the season, especially if Darwin's going to be out longer than what we would like. And then also the return of Emmy, because you're going to need that, especially down the stretch. Someone who can just approach and nick and knack his ways into goals and whatnot. So I'll give him a B right now. Last name before we wrap up. League finish. So right now the Kickers hit 8th, right? Matt, do you want to take a guess at where you had the Kickers finishing the season at?
I think I had him 9th or 10th before.
Got him at 9th. Now, this is the thing I'm going to ask you. Do you want to keep him at 9th, or do you change it?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I move him up one spot. I don't see it being any higher than 8th. I'm just trying to decide how positive am I feeling about the team right at this exact moment. Screw it. Let's go 8th.
All right. 8th place. That's your midseason prediction. All right. We'll come back to that, at the end. Hopefully after the final we'll win and we'll be like, hey, 8th was a little low.
Oh, you can win the final from 8th.
Yeah. Kate had the team between 7 and 8, but John, I'm gonna ask you where do you have this team at right now?
I think I'm holding at 8th. But I think there's gonna be movement around them. Like I'm feeling a fall off for Texoma, maybe for Naples. I'm kind of scared of Greenville and Portland making a rise. There's going to be a lot of movement because this league is just havoc, but Richmond feels pretty settled where they are right now.
Okay.
He's going against his model that has his 9th right now.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I put it out there because people like it, but I don't trust those numbers at all.
Look, I'm not going to lie. At the beginning of the season, when I saw everyone had us like 12, 11, what is blue winners, I was like, okay, all right. And then when the Kickers started out the way how they were, I was just saving articles. I was like, saving articles. Not so much now, but trust me, once the Kickers clinch a playoff spot, I'm not going to do the you, John, because I like you. But
no, the good thing about the model is that, I can just put that out there and say, here are the numbers, and then I don't have to take responsibility for it. I'm like, that's data. That's not my opinion. So it's like my easy cop-out.
Yeah, he's already said 4 out of 10 times we're getting in. He just picked one of the 4.
He did. Pick one of the 4. So once again, I gotta stop being so optimistic, man.
Yeah, you said something foolish like 4th, didn't you?
5th. I had 5th. Because I remember, because none of us said we were going to get a home playoff game. But I was like, all right, this team can be 5th. And if you ask me right now, I would say 7th. I'm still, I'm probably still higher than y'all, but I would say 7th. I think this team will follow the model of which they have before in the past is those last 3 weeks, the Kickers need a win and they'll find a way how to get it, and then they'll just lock up a playoff spot like that and not have the Henry Darby matter. What I'm really trying to get to is that I do not need to be stressed on that final day of the season. I do not need it.
Elliot, you can't say it like that because that's going to be the whole monkey paw. Like, oh, not stressed because it's over.
I need us to be in. I need us to be locked up, secured, heading into that final. So I'm gonna say 7. Having that mocked out there, but man, I think that's everything we went through. Yeah, just trying to make sure. John, man, this has been fun to get an outside perspective on the Kickers and whatnot. I mean, has this at all changed your mind about what the Kickers can and cannot be?
No, I feel like I'm pretty confident in how I'm feeling about this team. I think you guys have reinforced what I was thinking, which is important because I could be totally off base. Like I'm just turning on Kickers games every now and again as much as I can. But to hear like, okay, what I'm seeing is what you're seeing, I think that's probably mutually reinforcing. Like we know what this team is right now.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you this question because you do a lot of work for the USL Tactics and backfield and whatnot in writing. Are the Kickers the most? This team is who they are. Like this is who they are. Team. There's no changing it. There's no, some different. Is the Kickers that most team like that?
At least in League One, I think it's absolutely yes. Like you know what you're getting with Richmond week in and week out. Like there'll be tweaks. 2025 is a little bit different than the seasons past. But like once we got a sense for the style, like that's kind of it. We know what Richmond is for the year. So yeah, I would say so.
See, what's funny to me is like I totally get your point of view on that, and it's not wrong. But at the same time, I also think that the Kickers are the most unpredictable team because again, 4-4, 3-3, 4-3, and then all these 1-0s where 0 shots on target.
It's more like a process versus outcomes thing where
exactly.
Like, I know what Richmond's trying to do. It might not work. Like we're seeing all sorts of weird results.
Yeah, it just depends how you take the question.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure you guys are saying like I've done the Chaos BCS. And I guess the best way how to describe the Chaos BCS is like it gives you points based on how a team is playing. And like the Kickers are like top 2. I need to update it, but when I last looked at it, they were like top 2 with Spokane. And it's not like they're winning games. It's just like you said, John, this team is who they are. Like there's no changing it. This team doesn't have like the score. They might have very high scores, but like even for those games, they'll have like a 1-1 draw where it's just like, okay. Like this team is basically, I feel like all around, like middle of the road. It is just figure out which way they're going to go with this team. But once again, John, I just want to say thank you for taking the time of the year today, man. Where can everyone support you, reach out to you? Whatever you're doing with USL Tactics and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, just follow me on Blue Sky or Twitter at USL Tactics. I post everything there. But yeah, check out the USL show where we're covering the championship and League One. Backyard.com, the subscription. We love to see it. That's mostly championship, but I'm covering kind of like USL wide stories, whether that's Pro Rel, D1, that sort of thing, quite often as well. I've got the Substack where I'm doing a little bit of everything. That's probably the most League One coverage that I do by a comfortable distance. But yeah, just give me a follow on socials and you'll see it all.
Pretty much. And I can double check on that, man. Like, please, if you're going to support his work, please pay the subscription. It is 100% worth it. Also, pay ours as well. It helps with the show.
Support people who do independent media because it's like a lot of time and energy.
It is. Like, this is almost like a full-time job from what we do.
Yeah.
I know. Honestly, dude, I don't know where you find the time to do all this because I know there's been probably hundreds of people who have had like the conceptual idea of, oh, I'll be able to cover these teams and do all this and do all that. Easy to have the concept, actually executing it the way that you are and have been, really impressive. Like I said, tons of people think they can do it. You don't see too many people stick with it for any amount of time. So, well done there.
This is year 5 right now, and yeah, still getting the enjoyment out of it.
Hey, there you go. There you go, man. Matt, anything else from you, sir, before we wrap up?
Well, let's get everybody out to the stadium Saturday. See what kind of wacky hairstyle Matt Bentley's coming back with, and start that march to 8th place specifically.
There you go. Or holding on to 8th place, making it firm and making my prediction of 7th come true. So
if it has to be 7th or higher, I'll live with it.
Good. As always, listeners, we just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to our show. So with that being said, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and share the podcast with everyone. You can do so at rivercity93.com. If you want to donate to the show, once again, you go to rivercity93.com/donate or ko-fi.com/rivercity93. So for John at USL Tactics, for Matt, Kate, the rest of the show, and Shanair as well. Oh, real quick, happy birthday to Henry. His birthday's going to be on the 12th, so want to make sure to say happy birthday to him. But for everyone here, remember, make sure you touch some grass before you get to Chattanooga. Woosah is going to be okay. We got you covered here. As always, we love y'all. Be safe and be nice to someone. It goes a long way. See you guys in the next episode. Be easy and be safe.